The New Norm is brought to you by Winning at Home. I'm Steve Norman. Welcome to The New Norm. Lately, I've been reading through the book of Genesis, and most recently, I came across the story of Joseph again. And when Joseph is a teenager, his dad elevates him against his brothers. This is favoritism amongst siblings in its worst of all possible forms. And Joseph doesn't have the maturity to downplay that favoritism. He leans into it and embraces it, and it only makes his relationship with his 10 older brothers worse. And if you know the story, his brothers do a pretty horrific thing, which is sell him into slavery so that they don't have to deal with him anymore. And over the course of Joseph's life and journey in Egypt, he has to wrestle with the fallout of that wound, of that betrayal. And Joseph ultimately has to make a decision about whether he's going to forgive those guys or not. And recently I had an opportunity to be a guest at Joy 99, which is the radio station that is right across the street from our offices here in Zeeland, Michigan. And I have an opportunity to discuss with their morning co-hosts, Tommy and Brooke, what lessons we can learn from Joseph about the choice and the journey to forgive. So listen in on this.
It is Joy 99. Through the Joy Media mobile app, free download if you've never done it, thanks to Blue Water Cabinetry and Design.
We're all safe in the studio, including our good friend Steve for Winning at Home. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm better now that it's getting a little bit warm. We saw the sunshine for a minute, and we think it's still out there, but hoping we'll see it again.
It does change things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What have you been reading this year?
So I've been reading through the book of Genesis, and I'm getting near the end with the story of Joseph. And if you don't know the story of Joseph, he's one of 12 kids by 4 different moms. So like they are the ultimate blended family.
Oh, yeah.
And his brothers don't like him. And they decide that they're going to kind of eliminate him. And instead of taking his life, the next best thing is that they can make some money and sell him into slavery. So they do that when he is 17. And the next 13 years are just absolute craziness. But God is sovereign and good, and he releases him from being unjustly imprisoned and promotes him to the second highest person in all of Egypt, which is like the major superpower of the day. There's a famine, and his brothers, who he hasn't seen in 22 years, come to Egypt to buy food. And at that moment, Joseph starts to wrestle with all of the history. Because I think there was a part of him who was just like, I'm never going to see him again. I don't have to worry about it. And I don't know about you, but there are people in my life who I'm like, you know what, Lord, I've done my best to forgive. As long as I don't ever have to run into them, I'm going to be fine. Last week I had a funeral, and there was a chance that I was going to run into somebody who had done me wrong, and I was really, really antsy. They didn't show up, so I had like all that, I wasted all that angst on nothing.
Yeah.
But there was a part of me who's like, all right, Lord, in a vacuum, I can let it go as long as I don't have to see him. But God, in his sovereign wisdom, brought Joseph's brothers to his feet. They don't know who he is, and he hides his identity. You got to read the story in all of its detail. We're not going to get into like all of the finer points of it. But long story short is they come once, he sells them grain, he doesn't tell them who he is, and then they come back, and he sells them grain again, and then he plays this trick on them to get them to come back again, and then he finally reveals his identity. It has been 22 years since when they sold him to when he confronts them for what they've done and when he decides to forgive them. And so the verse is in Genesis 45, verse 5, when he finally decides to let him go. He goes, and now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. And what I love there is that a couple things happen. Joseph, acknowledges that they probably should feel distressed and angry because they did a horrific thing.
Yeah.
Like they would still be in jail
Right.
if that happened in the United States in modern times. So he says this, and then he says, don't be distressed for selling me. I love it. He names what they did. I think a lot of times we people say in forgiveness, it's just like, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm over it. It's like, no. It is a big deal. And forgiveness cannot be real unless we name what has been lost in the offense.
Forgiveness cannot be real. Say that again.
Forgiveness cannot be real unless we name what was lost in the offense.
Wow.
So sometimes when our kids we're like, hey, you hit your sister, say you're sorry, and they'll say they're sorry, and then the other sibling will say it's okay, it's not a big deal, and we'll always say time out. We're like, no. It was a big deal. You can't hit people.
Right.
That is something like we don't want you to get used to that.
Right.
We need to name that as something that is unsafe, something that's harmful, something that's unkind. And so what I love about Joseph and what I'm reminded about in my own forgiveness journeys is that if I need to forgive somebody, it's really important that I name this happened to me and it cost me this. This is what I lost. as a result of that person's carelessness or in worst case, malice. So he goes, this happened, but now he's got some perspective. He's got 22 years to look back on it. And he says, God used it for something beautiful. So he doesn't say, because God used it for something beautiful, it doesn't matter. No,
Right.
it does matter. And God used it for something beautiful. And so I think that if you're struggling with forgiveness, maybe something happened to you. Maybe you're Joseph. Maybe something happened to you when you were 17. Now you're 39.
Yeah.
You still think about that.
Yeah.
And you're going to bump into somebody who is a part of that. Maybe it's somebody from your immediate family that you haven't been in touch with for a long time. God is saying, what would it look like for you to adopt the posture of Joseph? And be able to say, like, you know what? I'm going to release you from any expectation on my part for vengeance, and I'm going to release you from any shame that the old me or the fleshly me wanted you to feel. Because I'll be the first to admit that people who have wronged me, like, I want them to feel stupid.
Right. I mean,
because they did a horrible thing.
Here's brothers are coming. They're begging to me now to help them out with their situation.
Right.
And that's got to feel powerful,
Right.
and justified,
Right.
at that point. But that doesn't mean it's right.
Right. And I had a mentor who told me, he's like, you never know when the power dynamics are going to flip and you are going to be over somebody who harmed you. He's like, what will you do then? He's like, because in the flesh, you'll be like, you know what I say to Joseph's brothers? Go ahead and starve. That's on you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you wanted me dead? Y'all can suffer. But for him to be able to say, like, not only am I going to let you live, I'm going to restore you into relationship with myself. And so I just want to remind you that forgiveness is a process. Like, Joseph didn't do this in an instant. It took him a couple of weeks, if not a couple of months, from when he saw them the first time to when he saw them the second time. So he had some time to kind of stew on it. And so forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is a process, and it's hard. But it's also not optional if we're going to be followers of Jesus. And there have been seasons in my life where I have been tithing and reading my Bible and fasting and memorizing Bible verses and was harboring a ton of bitterness in my heart. And I didn't look like Jesus. And I think that sometimes it's really easy for us to be able to say, like, I'm going to do all of the other things that make me look spiritually mature rather than the one hard thing.
It eats you up inside.
Right.
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 And I believe there's that one great quote that says, bitterness is the poison we swallow while hoping the other person dies.
Yeah.
And Lewis Smead says, when we forgive somebody, we set a prisoner free only to discover that the prisoner was us.
Right.
That's right.
And so
100%.
if you are kind of feeling bound by bitterness these days, know that God wants to set you free. And Joseph's story is interesting because you think it gets tied up with a nice little bow, and then you go to the end. 15 years later, their dad dies, and their brothers are scared that he only forgave them as a performance for his dad. So when their dad dies, they come back and they're like, please don't kill us now. And it says that he wept because he's like, oh, you didn't believe me the first time I let you go. So to know that in family dynamics, especially when they're dysfunctional, and we're all different degrees of dysfunctional, God is trying to unleash grace. And maybe you're the vessel through which that grace is going to flow in 2026.
The New Norm is produced and distributed by Winning at Home. Winning at Home is a faith-based nonprofit committed to making individuals, couples, families, and businesses stronger through counseling and coaching. For more information, visit winningathome.com. I'm your host, Steve Norman. Thanks for listening.